All India Management Association, AIMA, New Delhi, and started functioning as its local resource center.
KMA's objectives were well crafted right from the beginning. It was a journey with a purpose to build a strong business community through healthy interaction between corporate leaders and management gurus. This has helped many companies to surge ahead with sound professional management practices.
A growing economy often ushers in new trends in the market. Regular seminars and interactive workshops are conducted by KMA to keep up with the ever-changing market requirements.
A two-day annual management convention is conducted during the first quarter of every year, which is attended by over 1,000 delegates from all across Kerala. Eminent speakers of national and international repute lead this prestigious event.
KMA's many successful initiatives are very popular among its members. Some such initiatives are
Evening lectures by eminent people,
CEO Conclave,
Management Students Forum,
Young Managers Forum,
sector-specific seminars.
Women Managers Forum.
KMA is active in the social media networking sites and also has a comprehensive website www.kma.org.in.
KMA is managed by a managing committee comprising of prominent industry and corporate heads and functions at its own premises at Panambali Nagar, Cochin, which also houses spacious conference halls, classrooms and a library.
Based on their yearly performance, corporate companies are awarded KMA's Excellence Awards in 5 different categories, which promote healthy competition for excellence among members.
Membership. A membership in KMA offers opportunities to interact with the top management leaders in Kerala to share knowledge and skills, thereby commanding respect and credibility to your organization. Corporate membership is open to business houses, government enterprises, and educational institutions, etc.
Any individual who meets the norms set by KMA can enroll as life members on payment of the fees as a lump sum and half the fee for a senior citizen.
For more details, please contact Executive Director, Kerala Management Association.
Good evening and a warm welcome to all the invited guests, KMA leaders and members, and their esteemed speakers. Let us begin this special edition of KMA panel discussion series with a minute silence and pray to Almighty that we all remain safe and healthy and all of us overcome these challenging times. Continue to be seated wherever you are and close your eyes for a minute. Thank you and good evening once again. Now, before we embark on this panel discussion on a brand new Union Budget 2022, may I request Program Committee Chair at KMA, Mr. S.R. Nair, to formally offer the welcome address. S.R., as he is known, is a senior past president of KMA and is a renowned corporate mentor, business coach, author, blogger, and thinker who turned his focus to academia after a successful stint as an IT entrepreneur for many years. He keeps KMA stay relevant by conceiving and presenting regular programs like Leader Talk Series, StartCon Series, and the numerous topical panel discussions on a very regular basis. Inviting Mr. S.R. Nair to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, President Madhav. My job is to generally speak a little about the session today and then introduce a guest and hand it over to President for the President's address and thereafter for the function as it is. Okay. Now, this is going to be a budget analysis week. You know, there was a cartoon which is going around telling that, okay, until yesterday, how many economists India had? 1,000. Today, by the end of this week, how many economists India will have? 500,000. And next week, beginning Monday, how many economists India will have? 100 or 1,000, whatever it is. So that means this is going to be an analytical week of the budget. And though the relevance of budget analysis has been thinning down from time to time that we have seen, still many organizations, associations, they do this as a sometimes ritualistic, otherwise knowledge disseminating function. Okay, there are several news to this. This is a digitally presented budget. She actually read out from the tab. There was no text. She did it in less than about 65 minutes, one of the shortest of budgets, which made Mr. Mahindra, Anand Mahindra says that, okay, when she becomes shorter, she becomes more effective. That's what he had said, actually. Okay. Now, also there is another cartoon, okay, which is from Lakshman, R.K. Lakshman in You Said It, in which, this is an old period cartoon, something 20 years back, where a housewife is looking at a very disappointed but moronish husband who is watching the TV and telling that, hey, don't be so critical. Actually, it is a good budget if you don't view it from the economic angle. That is what she was telling, actually. So fantastic, So again, this is actually a perspective that we see. Okay, corporates seemingly have been praising the budget because it is very capital intensive. That is good. At the same time, Sensex and Nifty did not really shoot up the way it was expected. Maybe Professor Dr. Vijay Kumar will actually throw some lights on that. Okay, West Bengal, Kerala, as usual, sir, it's such a stupid budget, because there is nothing for them. K-rail, nothing. Monorails, nothing. Light rails, diet metros, nothing, nothing for a metro expansion, all those things. But Kerala claims that union government always borrows idea from Kerala. For example, digital university is going to be in all states. Kerala was a pioneer to start a digital university somewhere 1 year back. Okay. Now, opposition is claiming serious contradictions in the budget announcement. They're saying that on the one hand, they're saying it is privatization, and on the other hand, more investment in the public sector. So how do they manage this contradiction is what opposition is asking. Also saying that, okay, the government says that they are going to really prepare or spend a lot of money on urbanization, massive urbanization that is happening. That means more energy, more coal, more cement, more steel, more everything, and less of environment. And on the other hand, says that we will protect the environment. So that is a contradiction. So all this is there. I'm sure we will be hearing from our experts today. Okay. Budget analysis also depends upon the biases that the participants have, actually. So therefore, you always tend to get what is the bias that one has and to do that. Okay. It also depends upon how happy a person or his organization is from the benefits that he has derived from the budget. So it can't always be very, very objective. It could be subjective. It could be relative. That is what my job is, to welcome our participants today. Okay. At the outset, let me welcome the president of KMA and the chairman of the session, Madhav Chandran. Okay, dynamic president, doing a lot of activities, and has single-handedly taken the responsibility of completely rejuvenating KMA. Maybe you will see the KMA building by the end of March to see the yeoman efforts that is put up by Madhav and the risk that he has taken to see elevate KMA into completely new heights. You will see. Okay, President Madhav, a great welcome to you. Okay, now let me welcome Professor Dr. Vijay Kumar from Calicut University. He will be speaking to us on capital market. A very good friend of mine. We have shared many podiums together. Here I have interviewed him by 4 or 5 instances. Very interesting speaker. He laces fun and humor along with this presentation, so it is all the more interesting and easy to watch, and makes things, as a true professor that he is, makes things into your ear. You don't have, you just listen, it comes into you. I also take a great welcome to you. Okay. I also take this opportunity to welcome Chartered Accountant K. Gururaj Acharya, Senior Partner, KG Acharya and Company from Bangalore. Well, a great welcome to you, sir. In fact, as you have already said that you have been to KMA some time back. Okay. Now again back at KMA, trying to explain, and he most probably will be touching upon the tax proposals of the union budget. I also welcome the Managing Director of Travancore Coaching Chemicals and erstwhile CMD of HOCL, Mr. K. Hari Kumar, who shall be speaking to us on the impact of budget on SMEs and startup. A great welcome to you, sir. Hari Kumar, sir, a great welcome to you. Okay. We have our own past president, Vivek Krishna Govind, who today must have been really having a very long marathon day because he must have been part of the KSM event, this, that, etc. Okay, and he shall be actually putting up a perspective on the macroeconomic perspective. He will be. I think probably we will be starting with him. That's what I perceive. And to tie it through, to stitch it through, to moderate the whole section, we have this. We have our our own Honorary Secretary, Mr. Jomon K. George, Chartered Accountant Jomon K. George, okay, Senior Chief Executive Partner of JVR Associates. He will be moderating the session. A great welcome to you also. For the sake of, courtesy, I also welcome you, Jomon, into this session. Okay, I take this opportunity to welcome all the past presidents who are here. I take the opportunity to welcome all the managing committee members and executive committee members. I take this opportunity to welcome all KMA members and other local management association members from across the state of Kerala. I take this opportunity to again welcome the invitees, the press, and people from there. And I also take the opportunity to welcome the students who have joined us, ladies and gentlemen, all of you. I hereby offer a wonderful welcome. I hope this will be a very enriching session that we are going to see. I hand it back to President Madhav Chandran for his presidential address. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for the welcome address and especially for the brief observations on the union budget, as well as a few analytical observations on the analysis of the budget and for being there always with us. And a very good evening to each one of you present here, past presidents of KMA, and special thanks at the outset to our esteemed speakers of the day, Dr. Vijay Kumar of Geojit Financial Services, Chartered Accountant Mr. K. Gururaj Acharya of KG Acharya and Company, and our own in-house domain experts on the panel who are part of the KMA Managing Committee, past President, Chartered Accountant Vivek Krishna Govind of Verma and Verma Chartered Accountants, Mr. Hari Kumar, Managing Director of TCC Limited, and of course our Honorary Secretary, Chartered Accountant Jomon K. George of JVR Associates for making this discussion happen today. Today we have this panel discussion on the hot topic of the just unveiled union budget. Well, we could be one among the very first, as we mentioned earlier, to organize such an event immediately after the budget was presented in the Parliament yesterday. These are the sessions that the program committee at KMA put together by bringing some of the experts or stalwarts in the respective domains to our stage to deliberate and discuss on the various facets of such topical issues and enlighten us on the key points affecting our lives, businesses, and professions. If you recollect, we have had 5 such panel discussions in the recent past discussing some such weighty issues, and interestingly, many of them were taken up for discussions of that kind for the first time and thereafter taken over by mainstream media and other domain experts for detailed deliberations and dissections. In fact, last week we had one such panel discussion on the aspects leading to the developmental conundrum affecting our state of Kerala. Well, this is how KMA has been pulling on in these troubled times to keep our members engaged, remain positive, and provide with meaningful deliberations and events of utility. In spite of all the troubles and disruptions caused by the pandemic, for the information of our guests present here, KMA has been continuously bringing to you very many activities and events of purpose on a consistent basis. Regular leader talks lecture series, StartCon discussion series, women managers forum activities, memorial lectures, management education programs, MSME workshops. Yes, we were trying to serve suiting everyone's palate. We also conducted one digital summit, a leadership seminar in association with Rotary, and most recently, the KMA CSR Conclave and Awards, all of them in hybrid format. We also initiated a new event titled Rendezvous with the CEO, a program organized by the KMA CEO Forum, which features an interactive session with CEOs of national repute. Well, as the saying goes, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going, and that's exactly what KMA did, capitalizing on the general lull due to the pandemic times. We effectively used our secretariat team to complete the ISO certification for KMA, making us one of the rare management associations in the country who have this recognition of an ISO certification. We also initiated the reconstruction or the massive renovation works at the KMA house, which SR mentioned, at our own office at Panambali Nagar by converting the building into an iconic structure with the most modern convention facilities. If everything goes well, we expect to have the new building and convention center open by early March 2022, that is next month. We'll have some of the renowned names of Kerala, the Lulu Group, the Financial Holdings Group, Cochin Shipyard Limited, Geojit Group, Agape Diagnostics, FACT, SRK Group, Medivision Labs, and many more such successful corporate houses lending support as the patrons for this new building by branding individual halls in their names and also having their logos etched on the wall of fame for good. But the most important initiative that we would like to emphasize is the introduction of the KMA Scholarship for Financially Challenged Students for the higher studies. This is going to be an ongoing scheme of funding the education of poor students by utilizing CSR funds of corporates and helping these students in their pursuit of higher studies, especially that in management. Well, it is indeed fulfilling to note that all such new initiatives and the encouraging responses that KMA received from our members and delegates have played a big role in bringing IMA's two of the most coveted awards of the year, the Best LMA Award of the country and the Most Improved LMA of the Year Award to KMA this year. Thank you all for your wholehearted support this far. Well, coming to today's panel discussion, as I mentioned earlier, we could be one among the first to air the observations and analysis on the Union Budget 2022 that was presented yesterday. Though many among us expected a much more populist budget targeting the galleries as elections to some of the key geographies are in sight, Madam Sitharaman chose to tread a balanced path is what it appears. The Hindu highlighted the budget as a fine mix of fiscal prudence and structural reforms. Times of India quoting experts say that the finance minister has maintained focus on key thrust areas while increasing allocation towards capital spending, as well as taking a forward-looking approach by recognizing new age priorities. From what I understand from a macro perspective, of course, subject to concurrence of our experts here today, the new budget is built around 3 I's of economy: internet economy, inclusive economy, and infrastructure economy. As someone pointed out today, the buzzwords used by Finance Minister in her budget speech were: digital was the word used a frequent 34 times in the budget, capital was used 33 times, infrastructure, the word used, and investment, both of them mentioned 26 times, and health mentioned 17 times, among other keywords. Well, without much ado, let us move on to the panelists and the moderator present here to give us the expert's perspective to this important budget in this challenging time that we all are going through. We have Senior Chartered Accountant, who is also the Honorary Secretary of KMA, Mr. Jomon K. George, doubling up as a domain expert as well as a moderator of this discussion. Jomon is a renowned practicing chartered accountant with 30 years of experience and the chief executive partner at JVR and Associates and the former chairman of the Southern Region of the Chartered Accountants Institute. Apart from being a successful financial expert in India and the West Asia, he is also a thinker, orator, and a writer who can engage anyone in a very rich and meaningful or even a jovial conversation for hours together. Let me hand over the proceedings now to Mr. Jomon George to introduce our panelists and to engage them in a discussion to bring out their views and analysis on the union budget from different viewing angles, and also to handle the Q&A if time permits, and also summarize the session and finish it off. Thank you so much, and over to you, Jomon.
Good evening to all of you. The dynamic president of KMA, Madhav Chandran, was spoke well about me. The program committee chair, who has brought in a lot of a new series of major programs at KMA this year, S.R. Nair. The 4 eminent panelists, Vivek, Dr. Vijay Kumar, Mr. Hari Kumar, Guru Raj Acharya from Bangalore, members of KMA, invited guests and friends. I'm extremely happy to welcome once again all of you to this evening Budget Dissected, the panel discussion on the Union Budget 2022. And a lot of things have been said about the budget by SR and also Madhav. Last year also we had this budget analysis, not as an annual ritual, essentially because there are certain things which business world and the professionals and of course management students should know about the union budget, the balancing act which has been done year after year by the Union Finance Minister. And this time just for less than 48 hours ago. And as the media says, Nirmala Sitharaman voted for growth and fiscal consolidation, shunning all the populist measures which is expected out of this budget, with a great digital push, as the president rightly said, onto an internet economy. And then she did not overpromise, and with a lot of indigenous procurement, including for the defense. I think there is also a thrust on moving towards the Atmanirbhar Bharat, which are all new terms which have evolved over the years. And of course, with the required inputs, I think we are moving in the right direction. And therefore, we have 4 of these experts who have been brought in, and I should very specially thank you at the outset for consenting to be speakers at such short notice. Everything was shaped up in less than a couple of days. So with that introduction, And with that introduction, once again thanking the panelists. Let me now start with Vivek Krishna Govind, my own colleague in the profession, senior partner of Varma & Varma, who has had unparalleled exposure in audits across the country and even abroad. Past president and also son of legendary, very beloved and respected VCG. And Vivek is here to tell us about the macro perspective. Some of the aspects have been briefly touched upon during the introduction. So Vivek, these are the broad aspects which the budget is brought about, and we have a revenue deficit as usual, a fiscal deficit, the borrowings are going to happen. So to you for your take on the macro perspective. I understand that you have a PowerPoint presentation, and also I think the economic survey gave a feel-good factor, and back to normal situation is what the budget has been sending as probably as a sentiment. Therefore, I think we will have this swap between the four panelists. So I think probably you could have the first 10 minutes taken on the PowerPoint presentation the way that you want to do, and then we'll have some questions and interaction in between, and then move over to the other panelists. It's over to you, Vivek, now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Am I audible, visible, all okay? Great. So good evening, President Madhav, Program Chair SR, co-panelists Vijay Kumar sir, Guriraji, Hari Kumar sir, and JKG. Gives me immense pleasure and pride. This is a KMA forum, so it's very much part of our home series here. Three of us here are part of the managing committee, and two of the invited speakers here are extremely eminent professionals. So I think it's a great honor for all of us to be sharing this stage here. And as was rightly said, program conceived in less than 48 hours, the program invitation sent less than 24 hours back, and to see that 160 plus participants are here just goes to show the amount of interest that this topic continues to have. And I hope that in the next 1 hour we can collectively enthuse the audience here and also bring about some interesting Q&A also. So I'll start with some opening remarks. I've got very few slides, just 5-6 slides, because when you talk about economic survey, especially some of these are raw numbers. I thought it's better to have a slide as a backup. All right, so let me start on a positive note by stating that this is a budget which is capex intensive, long-term growth oriented. So probably we should see this. Madam Nirmala Sitharaman started by saying that you must look at this as India's stepping stone towards India at 100. We've all been waiting for India at 75. There have been several forums, where we've discussed documents at length on India at 75. Now here we are in India at 75, talking about India at 100. And this certainly is a budget with a long-term vision, a long-term perspective. But while saying that, I think one must also understand, accept that there is hardly any short-term relief. World is suffering, country is suffering, the common man on the street and the middle class, lower middle class, and the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid are suffering, and hardly any short-term relief per se. But probably many of these announcements will have a bearing in the longer term, which will help in lifting up the economy at a macro level. And since the topic that has been given to me is the macroeconomic, that is again the moderator who's the brain behind the session, Jomonji, is thrown a googly this time by asking me to speak on macro, especially in the presence of the macroeconomic guru Vijay Kumar sir. So it's I'm glad that he's going to speak after me, so that any corrections in whatever I may say, I'm sure he can just start with that, and he speaks so fluently from the word go. So wherever little tidbits of information needs to be added to what I speak, sir, I would request you to please add your macroeconomic perspective also to when you speak about the markets. Let me start. Now, when we talk about macroeconomic, it should start one day prior to the budget. We cannot start with the budget document or the budget speech alone. We need to take a step back and go one day prior to the budget, when the all-important economic survey is announced. Now, quite often the economic survey does not have the kind of fanfare which the budget has, and does not have the kind of discussion which the union budget has. But this is a very, very important document, and particularly this year it has been brought out in a very nice manner. And because India does not have a chief economic advisor right now, the principal economic advisor, Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, has ensured that, I think, brought in more transparency into the way in which it has been prepared. It can be understood that it's come out in two parts, and those of us who have read the document can, I'm sure will admit that this time there seems to be a lot more, like we talk about ease of doing business, there is also ease of understanding the document also. Normally, it takes a solid economist to break down some of the things in the economic survey. And, typically the economic survey also contains a lot of vision of the government and all that. But this time they're stuck to the grassroots, and probably this looks more like a report card of the last 1 year. And the economic survey brought about 5 very key aspects. 5 takeaways, as I would like to say, from the economic survey. First is that India is likely to grow at 8 to 8.5% in 22-23, which is very heartening. The second is that the consumer price index is less than 6%, somewhere between, somewhere close to 5.5%, which is also good. Inflation being capped below 6%. Third is that during the entire pandemic time, the Indian government and the whole ecosystem adopted a very agile approach. The word agile seems to be used multiple times in the economic survey. So the whole agile approach, the dynamic manner in which India has handled the pandemic also is something about which there is a lot of discussion in the economic survey. It also talks about the fourth aspect is that there is a room for fiscal spending. So in fact, the economic survey hence gave us some kind of an idea that when the budget is announced, there could be announcements for higher infrastructure spending. The first seeds of that were sown in the economic survey when the survey talked about room for higher spending because of increased tax revenues, almost 67% tax revenue increase. So there is some room for higher capex was a direction which seemed to be there in the economic survey. And finally, the fifth point that the macroeconomic fundamentals are strong. GDP growth, inflation, and that the fundamentals of the economy are very strong was also a message that was part of the document. Now, when you talk about the economic survey, I cannot just talk from without showing some numbers, which is the reason why I thought I'll just have a very, very brief 2-3 slides on that, and probably after that we can continue. I've also got some slides related to the sectoral impact of the budget, which probably, if required, can be opened up during discussion. But right now, I've already spoken for 5-6 minutes. So next couple of minutes, I'll quickly run through the numbers, because I think it's important that we understand where our economy stands. Is this visible to all? Yeah.
Yes, it's visible. It's visible. Please go on.
Thank you. The GDP growth rate, as I said earlier, estimated to be 8 to 8.5% in FY23. Growth for present financial year pegged at 9.2%. The least hit sector by COVID pandemic was the agricultural sector, and it expected to grow at 3.9% by the time we close the financial year. Industrial sector likely to grow at 11.8%. The word likely is because we are only in January. We have time, another couple of months to go, which is the word likely is seen in the economic survey multiple times. Services sector to see a growth of probably around 8.2%. Spend on social services hiked by 9.8% to 71.61 lakh crore in FY22. India's total exports expected to grow by 16.5% in 21-22. So this will go beyond the pre-pandemic level. So it's just, these are all signs and signals that we are back on track, and there is the whole combination. It's not just about the growth alone that we are looking at. There is certainly the V-shaped economy about which we've all been listening to and analyzing, seems to be now translating into numbers. So on the one side, there is the recovery side. On the other side, there is also improved compliance. Actually, the last 2-3 years, probably the pandemic has ensured that the compliance factor is taken more seriously, combined with greater enforcement. Various departments are enforcing the laws in a much more stringent manner now. So as a result of that, the unorganized economy is slowly shrinking and moving into the more organized sector, which is resulting in higher tax revenues, higher GST. The whole economy is, is moving into a more what we call the white market economy, so to say. Now, the survey says railways will emerge as an engine of national growth. In fact, it's seen as the backbone of the entire economy, connecting the country, and more than 65,000 crores spent in the first 8 months of the previous financial year. Government consumption to grow by 7.6%, surpassing the pre-pandemic levels again. Imports expected at 29.4%. And startup, again, Madhav spoke about some of these elements. We'll probably take that up during the course of discussion also, where words like digital and crypto, new gen words, which probably the next generation, most of our children would probably, feel very comfortable listening to these words, having so much of prominence in the budget speech also. Digital, crypto, gaming, and drones. These are all words which are virtual,
digital.
virtual. These are all things which found probably more mind space and time space than direct tax and indirect tax and also. This is the new era that we are looking at, and it's great to see that after US and China, India is now the third largest startup ecosystem. 75 IPO issues which have raised almost 90,000 crores between April and November, of which 29 companies generated almost 15,000 crore compared to the previous year. 89,000 this year, vis-a-vis 15,000 crore in the previous year. That's almost 6 times. 1.81 lakh crore raised through equity issues, 221 lakh individual demat accounts. UPI has taken center stage, 4.6 billion transactions through UPI. We are talking about demonetization and the demerits of it for several years now. Finally, we are able to begin to see the advantages of that, especially in a world which was locked up for 2 years. The UPI and digital transactions have really shown that. Likely jump in housing sales also. And quick look before I sign off and hand back the moderator is that these were some of the important aspects which were discussed in the economic survey. And now moving on to the budget per se, I will just stop with only the fiscal scenario and hand it over. And 22-23, the expected estimated expenditure is 39.45 lakhs compared to 37.7 lakh. The fiscal deficit, very realistic looking numbers, believable numbers for a change. 6.9% is what was the fiscal deficit for the current year, expected to go down to 6.4%. So they have not said, if they said 4.5% or 5% for next year, we would all have scoffed at it. But now these numbers actually look reasonably believable. Disinvestment target has also been pegged much lower than what it was in the previous year. In the previous budget, they were talking about 1.75 lakh crores of disinvestment target, plus another 6 lakh crore of monetization of assets over 4 years and all that. So this year, some kind of a reality check has happened, and this 1.75 lakh crore has been brought down to 78,000 crore for the current year. And next year, it has actually been reduced. So 65,000 crore is all that has been budgeted for the next year. So this is where we stand, and with this, I will stop for now and hand it back. We'll continue the discussion appropriate time. If I have the time to share my slides related to the sectoral,
come back to you. Sure. That was really nice, Vivek. You started with the economic survey. So I think it is that feel-good factor, back to normal factor, which gave the strong foundation and the confidence for building up the edifice of this budget, where not much of as we mentioned, it is devoid of populist measures. And so therefore, that is the outlook, and that was really nice. We'll come back to you a little later. Now to Dr. Vijay Kumar on the capital market. I think it was a big salute by the BSE, 848 points and 237 points by the Nifty. And today also the market is in a bit mood. So we would like to really hear from you, that Chief Investment Strategist of Geojit, plus SRS introduced you as an academician. And it doesn't stop here. We know that you have delivered lectures across the globe, including the Central European University in Budapest. And your strategies and your advices of bringing and dropping in, I would say, more than handsome returns and a corporate banner to people who are associated with you. Great to have you here this evening. And since it's related, let's also, we would like to hear from you on the proposed LIC IPO also, which at this present kind of valuations which are yet to be finalized is said to be 1 lakh crore in the range of that. And here the disinvestment target in 65,000. So I think it is conservatively taken at 65,000. Vivek mentioned about that, other receipts of the budget. So it's over to you, Dr. BKV, for your expert views on budget, its capital market impact. And where do you see the Sensex at the end of this year? We are around 59,000. Where do you see that? Plus, with the permission of the president, a few advice or a few picks. We all in the capital market. Free advice on a few picks which would give us some returns in the short term as well as in the long term. Over to you, sir. Sir, you're muted. You have to unmute. Yeah.
Okay, am I audible now? Okay. Thank you, Jomon, for those nice words. President of KMA, Mr. Madhav Chandran, my good friend SR, fellow panelists, including Vivek, Mr. Gururaj Murthy, whom I have not met, and there's one more panelist. Good evening to all of you. I'm delighted to be with all my friends at KMA, though virtually. I love physical meetings, looking people in their eyes and talking, but then we don't have a choice in this pandemic. So again, let me say it is an honor to be with all of you to talk on the impact of the budget on the capital market. Vivek has done a good job of painting the macro picture of the economy, how the economy did last year, how it is doing this year, and what is the emerging trends going forward. I'm very grateful to him for having laid the foundation so that I don't have to go into the macroeconomic aspects, even though I would like to add a couple of points to what he said towards the end of my talk. I've been asked to talk to you on the impact of the budget on the capital market. As we all know, the budget doesn't have any proposals relating to the capital market. No tax proposals, as you are all aware of. All the important taxes relating to the capital market, securities transaction tax, short-term capital gains tax, long-term capital gains tax, including corporate tax, which has a bearing on the capital market. All these remain unchanged. So the industry didn't have any wish list. We didn't ask for anything, knowing fully well that we will not be getting that. Also, more importantly, nothing was taken away. There was a fear that certain things may be taken away because some economists, very serious economists, have suggested hiking the capital gains tax, long-term capital gains tax from 10% to 20%. The logic was, why do you tax the unearned income? Long-term capital gain is treated as unearned by many, even though it is a point of debate. So why tax unearned income at 10%, the earned income tax at 30%? And some economists from the left, as always, had even suggested the introduction of a wealth tax, where wealth is measured on the value of the stocks that you own. This would have been prescriptions for disaster as far as the capital market is concerned, but then the government fortunately did not listen to any of this advice, and they did not rock the boat. So as we say, no news is good news, and the market has responded to this. No news is good news, and as you rightly gave the figures, the Sensex responded with a 21 salute yesterday and followed up today also with close to 700 points rally in the Sensex 695 or so. So the of course there is one proposal which is indirectly related to the capital market, that is capping the surcharge on long-term capital gains to 15%. Yeah. I'm sure our fellow panelist, who is a taxation expert, who knows much more about these things than I do, will throw more light on that. Therefore, I'm not transgressing into his territory. That's only capital market related proposal in the budget. But we know the stock market has responded very, very positively. So why is it that the market is responding positively? Market is responding very smartly to the proposals, rather in an unexpected fashion. Well, you might have observed, as keen observers of the market, all of you might have observed that the market has turned excessively volatile for the last couple of months, particularly by January. In the first few days of January, it was stable and resilient. Then there was a big correction because there was a correction in the mother market US, where the Nasdaq corrected by 16% from the peak. So when Nasdaq corrects, when the US markets corrects, well, the rest of the world markets catches cold. Therefore, European markets reacted, Indian markets, all the emerging markets also corrected. Right now, the markets are very volatile. After we had almost a one-way Wall Street and one-way Dalal Street from April 2020 till the end of, let us say, 2021. It was a very strange and unusual one-way street, but we know stock markets are not one-way streets. There are ups and downs in the market. So this year has begun with very high volatility, heightened volatility with sharp rises. One day, the last Friday, that is the Nasdaq appreciated by 3.13%. One day, the index appreciating by 3.13%, and some leading tech names rising by 8%, 9%, 12% in a day. So we are living in very volatile times. So why the markets have turned excessively volatile with the volatility index VIX showing a sharp up move? The reason is we are caught in the cross currents of headwinds and tailwinds. There are both headwinds and tailwinds for the market, both positives and negatives. The biggest headwind, as we all know, is that central banks will be tightening monetary policy in 2022. This year will be the year of global monetary tightening because inflation has become a major problem in the developed world. It's not yet a global problem because it's not an issue in China. It is not an issue in Japan. But in US, inflation is at a 42-year high, 7%. In India, it is 5.6 and 7%. I can't think of any period when the US inflation was 1.5% higher than Indian inflation. So times are changing. So 42-year high inflation in the US. In the European Union is the highest after 1997. In emerging markets, it is rising. So the Fed had already signaled tapering of quantitative easing, but then we are not going to have taper tantrums this year, unlike the taper tantrums of 2013, because we are fully prepared. The taper tantrums of 2013 came like a bolt from the blue. It was not properly telegraphed, but the present Fed chief, Jerome Powell, is communicating well and giving adequate precautions to the market. Therefore, he has very, very correctly communicated that the quantitative easing will stop by March. The bond buying program will stop by March this year, and the Fed will start raising rates, perhaps in March itself, but we do not know. The uncertainty is no one knows, including Jerome Powell himself, or the Fed itself does not know, because the Fed is very, very famous for responding to emerging data. It is a data-driven central bank with 850 PhDs in economics, but that may be too much, perhaps, too much. As SR said in his introductory remarks, economists always speak about on the one hand and on the other hand, right? That's why Ronald Reagan famously asked for a one-handed economist. Will anyone give me a one-handed economist so that I will listen only to one point of view? So when you have 800 PhDs in the Fed, well, 425 will be on the one hand, and the rest 425 will be on the other hand, putting the Fed in a very confusing situation. So that is why the Fed for the last 3 or 4 months have been saying that inflation is a transitory phenomenon and not a structural problem. But now they have dropped the word transitory and accepted the fact that they are behind the curve. But even now there is a lot of uncertainty. How many times Fed will raise rates in 2022? How many times in 2023? Will the Fed panic if inflation further rises and raise rates by 50 basis points in March, which will be rather disruptive for the financial markets globally? So we do not know. That is an area of concern. So anyway, one thing that we can take for granted, one thing which is fait accompli, is that interest rates will be moving northwards in 2022, and rising interest rate environment is not conducive for equity markets, because particularly when stock markets are highly valued as they are. When markets are highly valued, when the valuation parameters like PE ratio, price to earnings multiple, price to book, dividend yield, and what Warren Buffett calls the most important indicator, market cap to GDP, all these are I wouldn't say flashing red, but all these are indicating very high valuations. And at very high valuations, markets are vulnerable to corrections. Therefore, when we have the Fed and the ECB, and also followed by emerging market central banks. Already, South Korean central bank has raised rates. Brazil has raised rates. The only outlier is Turkey, which is cutting rates when inflation is at 36%. That is very strange voodoo economics. No one knows what is Erdogan's economics. Conventional economics tells us that when you have raging inflation of 36%, you should be raising interest rate. But Erdogan, driven by Islamic economics, is cutting interest rates when inflation is rising, which is landing Turkey in a very bad situation with galloping inflation and the Turkish currency crashing by 48% in 1 year. Anyway, I'm not going to the details. So when we have this tightening interest rate scenario, naturally, it is not favorable to the capital equity markets, particularly when the valuations are high. At the same time, we must appreciate the fact that there are favorables also, very strong tailwinds also, which imparts a lot of resilience to the markets and even takes the markets forward in the midst of these headwinds. And what are these strong tailwinds? As Vivek told us, the economy is doing well, 9.2% GDP growth this year, likely to accelerate, likely to grow between 8 to 8.5% in the coming year. So 2 years consecutively, very impressive growth rates. That will make India the fastest growing large economy in the world. So the corporate sector is doing well. A very important point to note is that when the GDP contracted by 7.3% in 1920, the year of the pandemic, so 2021 rather, 2021, the GDP contracted by 7.3%. Of course, it is likely to be brought down to 6.6% by when the final estimates come. Even when the GDP contracted by 7.3%, corporate earnings, in spite of the lockdown, grew by 15%. That is something very, very significant. Indian organized sector, Indian companies in the organized sector have business models which are immune to even lockdowns. To give you an instance, TCS has a new business model which they call 25-25. 25-25 for TCS is, by the year 2025, 3 years from now, only 25% of the employees of TCS will be working from their offices. The rest will be working from home, or rather work from anywhere. So when you have a black swan, even like the pandemic, the companies can very quickly adapt. And that is why the organized sector is doing well. This kind of adaptability, cockroach-like adaptability, you cannot expect from the unorganized sector. If suppose a person is running a restaurant or a hotel, services industry with the consumer touch points, this kind of transition, this kind of adaptability is not possible. That is why the organized sector has been left completely unimpacted.
Dr. BKB, can I move on to the next? I'll come back to you on the specifics. You have given the global perspective. Yes. Is it okay, or you want to go for some more time? And
yes, I will take 3 minutes and two more minutes and conclude. Yeah. So this is a very, very.
We'll come back to you for sure. Yeah.
Yes, this is a very important tailwind for the markets. Now, let me conclude by just going back to the point that I raised initially. That is the Fed tightening. The Fed tightening alone need not be a concern for global markets. To give you an example, between 2003 to 2006, a 3-year period from 2003 to December 2006, the Fed raised the interest rate 17 times. 17 times, from 1% to 5.25%. Raising interest rates 4.25% in 3 years, but the market boomed. Because in spite of this tightening by the Fed, globally the economy boomed. It was a Goldilocks scenario for the global economy, which grew by 4.5% a year during that period. My point is, in spite of the Fed tightening, in spite of central banks all over the world tightening, including RBI, if economic growth performs well, economic growth performs as expected, then growth can trump this monetary tightening blues, the rising interest rates. Therefore, that is a very strong tailwind for the markets. So we are in this cross currents of tailwinds and headwinds. The markets, you can expect markets to be extremely volatile. Volatility is the nature of the beast, we know that, but it will be more so in the coming months. But then the economy does well, the market will continue to be resilient, but there will be sharp corrections between 2003 and 2006. There were 3 corrections of more than 20% and 5 corrections of more than 10%. So that kind of corrections we never had during the last 2 years. Such corrections can be expected, and these corrections can turn out to be very good buying opportunities also. Over to you, Joma.
Thank you, sir. I will surely come back to you. That is a global perspective and the mood of the market and the way corporates are doing well, corporate earnings. So in the second innings, I'm sure that you would focus more on the Indian market and give us a few tips as well and on where the Sensex is going. Now it's time to hear from Guru, Raja and Acharya, my dear friend from Bangalore, chartered accountant Guraj Acharya sir. He is a sought after consultant in the most happening city of Bangalore. Speaks on a variety of topics. It's not just income tax. It could be corporate law, it could be FEMA, it could be global financial reporting standards. And he is a researcher, and in the backdrop itself, you can see the references that he makes. And today is all digital, but still very, very effectively delivering his professional duties as a practicing professional, and also associated with the parent institute in many ways, rendering yeoman service. So on behalf of all of us here, we once again welcome you. And on the tax proposals, I'm sure that you would have a few slides to be shown. Direct tax, no major changes per se, but reading between the lines, we would like to hear from the experts what are the things one has to be careful about. And they have also boldly, though it is not legal as yet, decided to tax the gains from crypto or virtual digital assets and so on. There are a lot of developments, and SSCs have time to correct and come back clean on the thing. So therefore, we would like to hear from you. Yeah, it's over to you, sir. Prajit, I think you're showing the wrong slide. Wrong slide.
No, this is my slide. By the way, thank you, Jamun. Thank you, Jamun. I just wanted to thank the organizers for inviting me all the way from Bangalore to be in the midst of the most brilliant brains of Kerala, Kerala Management Association. I've known Mr. Vivek Krishna for a long time, and I've heard Professor Vijay Kumar speaking. Very enriching to listen to both of you, sir. And I'm sure Hari Kumar is also going to enrich me in the process. So I'm going to talk about the tax proposals. But in the process, yes, of course, you said about the budget being long-term. Madam talked about Azadi Ki Amrit Ka Mahotsav, and when she talked about this is the 4th budget presented by Madam, somewhere I felt that the budget speech was slightly boring. Maybe the law of diminishing marginal utility kicked in. She was not as enthusiastic as she was in the beginning, but be it as it may, as far as the taxpayers are concerned, as Mr. Vijay Kumar was mentioning, the biggest thing is, although she did not meet our expectations, we were expecting some relief for the taxpayers because there was a good buoyancy in the tax collection. In spite of that, she did not give us any relief. But at the same time, we were not asked to pay any new taxes. As far as chartered accountants are concerned, we are very happy that we don't have to read a lot on this particular new budget, because there is nothing to read. Now, talking about the entire budget outlay, 39.45 lakhs crore is the total outlay for the budget, out of which, let me tell you, 30% of the total contribution towards the budget outlay comes from income tax. So what we talked about, corporation tax and income tax. Corporation tax necessarily means the tax paid by the corporates, and income tax means the tax paid by the non-corporates. So together they come out of this one book. Mr. Jamun and I read every day. Of course, Vivek also, this is one income tax act which contributes 30%. But unfortunately, the entire 30%, whatever we collect, nearly 66% of it goes towards payment of interest. goes towards payment of interest. A very, very unfortunate thing because of the borrowings, and that's what fiscal deficit is all about. I'm not going to talk about the numbers in that sense. I'll straight away go to the tax proposals. The general picture of the tax proposal is that stability is maintained, and stability in taxation is in fact a virtue. So in that sense, we welcome the budget from the stability perspective. The focus also, right for the last 4 years since Narendra Modi ji came into picture, was to ensure that not a penny escapes taxes. So leading to increased compliance, we see that a lot of work has been shifted to the businessman, to the extent of filling small returns like specified financial transactions or deducting TDS at the rate of 0.1%. Such trivial issues being shifted to the taxpayer. In the process, ensuring that no tax is escaping the assessment. Now, heavy disincentive for tax evasion. A lot of penal provisions being introduced, and in case a tax evasion is caught, mind you, the penalties are severe. The amount of tax, interest, and penalties that need to be paid will be much more than the income itself. So that is the scheme of things that has already been there, and it is accentuated in the present budget. Now we will see at least 4 or 5 very important amendments happening just to beat the favorable judgments that were given in favor of the assessee. That is what I consider it as very bad. In fact, whenever the department loses a case, they have the all power. They are, of course, omnipotent to make the changes. In fact, in some of the cases, retrospective. The only good thing for the taxpayer, is Nirmala Sitharamanji, almost made a namaste and said thanks to the taxpayers of the country who have contributed immensely. No wonder, let me tell you, as against the budget estimate of 11 lakh crores from income tax, the total expected revised estimate is coming to about 12.5 lakh crores from income tax. And from the next year, 14.2 lakh crores is coming out of income tax. And she, of course, brought out some very good sloka saying that whatever they have to do has to be done in the point of dharma. I think this is a very interesting tweeter that I saw. Madam, anything for the taxpayers? And Madam says, yeah, thank you for the contribution. I think that was the message. But having said that, I come straight away to the proposals. I have picked about top 18 changes in the tax law, although there may be, if you look into the budget speech, he talked about some 10 or 12 provisions, but the devil is always in the details. Now, once budget speech is not budget, there are a lot of budget documents, about 16 budget documents one has to go through to unravel what is there in the budget. So for as chartered accountants are concerned, we'll have to look into the finance bill. In the finance bill for the direct taxes, there are about 40 changes. I am talking about top 18 changes relevant to the management cadre rather than to get into the tax level when we talk about all the 40 proposals. Status quo maintained with respect to tax rates for individuals and for corporates. Very interestingly, last year we had the concept of optional tax scheme. That optional tax scheme, which is a reduced rate of tax for individuals and HUF, continues, provided you give up a lot of exemptions and deductions. Exemptions and deductions such as HRA, standard deduction, LTC for salaried person. For a businessman, it could be additional depreciation. And for everybody, let us say standard section 80 deductions and interest on house self-occupied property. These are the things which if we give up, the rate of taxation will be on a reduced scale. This is the normal rate of taxation which we have. 2.5 lakhs, up to 2.5 lakhs, there is no tax. 2.5 to 5 lakhs, there is a 5% tax. 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs, there is a 20% tax, and more than 10 lakhs is taxed at the rate of 30% for individuals and HUF. While this continues with all exemptions and deductions, there is an optional scheme under section 115 BAC, wherein up to 5 lakhs, it will be the same. But beyond 5 lakhs, and in the earlier scheme, 5 to 10 lakhs was 20%. Here, what happens is for every 2.5 lakhs increase, the rate of tax will increase by 5%. So for example, 5 to 7.5 lakhs, there is a 10% increase, 7.5 lakh to 10 lakhs, it will be 15%, and so on and so forth. So this scheme continues. Provided you give up a lot of exemptions and deductions. So the second point, which of course Mr. Vijay Kumar talked about, is the long-term capital gains. Earlier they said only for listed equity shares. In fact, very interestingly, we just talked about only the tax rates. One has to look into the surcharge. Now, surcharge and cess. In fact, income tax is not collected in one challan. We have to fill in different columns within the challan towards income tax, towards surcharge, and towards cess. And what is income tax? Income tax is collected, and income tax is collected in the name of income tax from non-corporates, and for corporate, it is corporation tax. The reason it being collected under two headings is that the share between whatever is collected by the central government will be shared between the state government and the central government. A higher share of the corporation tax will be retained with the central government, and a lesser share will go to the state government if it is paid by the companies. But for non-corporates, what the income tax, what we say, a higher share will go to the states and a lesser state share will come to the state government. So that is the reason for it to be distinguished. Having said that, from the surcharge, the income tax department or this central government levies surcharge instead of increasing the income tax rates for a reason that the entire surcharge will be going to the central government kitty itself. No portion of surcharge will go to the state government. And the cess collected, entire portion of cess will go only to the central government for the prefix for what it is collected. Now, for the moment, cess is collected for secondary and higher education, so it will go only for that particular purpose. Now, as you see in this particular slide, for individuals, the rate of surcharge goes up as the income increases. So one is progressive rate of taxation. Apart from progressive rate of taxation, there is a double progression in terms of collection of surcharge from such rich individuals. So if the income is between up to 50 lakhs, there is no surcharge. 50 lakhs to 1 crore, 10% surcharge, taking that 30% to as high as 34.32%. If the income is between 1 to 2 crores, the surcharge will be 15%. Between 2 to 5, it will be 25%, and above 5 crores, the surcharge will be as high as 37%. So this is the scheme which continues. But what they have done is, last year they said the surcharge of up to 37%, although it is there, will be capped only up to 15%, even if the income is more than 2 crores for an individual, if the gain is on account of long-term capital gain on sale of listed equity shares and equity-oriented mutual funds. But this budget has gone to further extend the benefit to say, on all the long-term capital gains, it could be sale of unlisted equity shares, it could be sale of immovable property. The surcharge that will be levied will be pegged at 15% as against 37%. A very, very good a good scheme. So that's why whatever good schemes in my presentation, it will be in blue. Now, the second point to be noted is the AMT. I mean, there is some relief given to the cooperative society in terms of reduction in the alternative minimum taxes. Corporates have to pay minimum alternative taxes. For non-corporates, what is paid is called alternative minimum taxes. That means, in simple terms, if the profits are higher, and when it is multiplied at a particular rate as applicable at 15% for corporates, 15% of the book profit or 30% of the taxable income of a company, if it is at the 30% bracket, unless it becomes a 22% in case they opt for a reduced rate of taxation under 115 BAA. So that particular tax as calculated on the taxable income or 15% on the book profit, whichever is higher, has to be paid. So that is what is called as minimum alternative tax, which is now not very popular for corporates, because corporates don't have to, if they come under the optional scheme under 115 BAA and BAB, MAT is abolished. But for cooperative societies, also there is 115 BAD. 115 BAD, which says you can go in for an alternative scheme at the rate of 22%, in which case you don't have to pay AMT. But if you don't want to use the alternative scheme by giving up a lot of exemptions and deductions, you have to pay an AMT at the rate of 18.5% was what was told, but now they have reduced it to 15%, like in the case of corporates. And also there has been a reduction in surcharge for the cooperative societies. Now, this is what Mr. Jaman K. George was talking about, virtual digital assets. Popularly in our midst, we call it as cryptocurrencies, such as bitcoins and things like that. So we were anxious to find out how it is going to be taxed. There were a lot of debates happening amongst the chartered accountants to find out whether it is a capital asset, whether it is a business asset, what happens if it is mined and things like that. Now there has been absolute clarity. The clarity is it is taxed at the highest rate. It is taxed at the highest rate. It is, first of all, digital asset, virtual digital asset has been defined under section 2, subsection 47A, and it is going to be taxed at 30% without any expenditure, allowing any expenditure incurred towards acquiring it, except for cost. I mean, except for cost, there is no indexation. So the sale value of the virtual digital asset minus the cost. If there is any expenses incurred in between for, let us say, interest expenditure or salaries or rentals, cannot be claimed as a deduction. Only the cost can be claimed, and the difference will be taxed at 30%. No allowance or set off of any loss. Very interestingly, no allowance or set off of any loss allowed while computing income from transfer of such asset. No set off of any loss arising from the transfer. If I am having a loss, I cannot set it off. If I have a loss in any other business, I cannot set it off against this. Such loss not allowed to be carried forward also. So these are very tight mechanisms brought in. Then virtual, I mean, in case I gift the VDA to Mr. Jaman K. George, then Jaman K. George will have to pay tax on that particular VDA which he receives the monetary value if it exceeds more than 50,000 rupees. Now it is considered as property under 56(2)(10). Now at the same time, if I am selling the virtual asset to Mr. Vivek, now it becomes the obligation of Mr. Vivek to make a TDS on me so that my transaction gets recorded from the income tax perspective. So I'm not getting the rates and things like that. So very interestingly, I talked about one of the important sections called 115BAB, which is a concessional rate of tax for corporates if they give up a lot of exemptions and deductions is made available to them. And in that context, they went on to say that the concessional rate is 15% if it is going to be a company incorporated after 1st of October 2019 and starts commercial production by March 2023, which has been extended to March 2024. Similarly, for eligible startups, there is a very good deduction allowed under section 80 IAC, which is at the rate of 100% of the profits will be exempt in any of the 3 consecutive years in the first 10 years. So provided they start their business by 31st of March 2022, they incorporate before 31/3/2022, being either a company or an LLP. So that also they have extended it by 1 year. Now, some of the changes which have happened is cess I talked about. There were certain favorable judgments to say that cess can be claimed as a business deduction. Now they said cess cannot be claimed as a business deduction, and there has been a retrospective disallowance on this particular expenditure of cess if it is claimed with effect from assessment year 2005-6. Now section 14A is very interesting. It says that in case you incur any expenditure on earning an exempt income, that expenditure will not be allowed. Now, we were always trying to hoodwink by saying, although there is an expenditure incurred, there is no exempt income. There is no exempt income that I have spent. So therefore, this expenditure should be allowed. Now, that has been put a full stop. Now, disallowance of any expenditure under section 37. Very interestingly, 37 says that any expenditure which is incurred for the purpose of business will be allowed unless it is in the case of a penalty or for violation of any law. Somehow we were trying to say that violation of law in India only has to be disallowed. Violation of law, if it is outside India, it should not be disallowed. But then they have blocked that, saying that violation in India or outside India will be blocked. And another point that they have went on to say is, if there are certain code of conduct for certain professionals, especially like doctors. So what used to happen is there was a CBDT circular saying that the code of ethics from the Indian Medical Association says that doctors should not take any freebies from the medical pharma companies. So there was a ban on them to take. But pharma companies always used to argue the ban is on the other person, not on me. I can give freebies and claim it as an expenditure. And there were a lot of court decisions to say that that is allowed because there is no ban on the freebies to be given by the medical companies. Now they have put a block by saying if there is anything which should not be done from the other person's point of view, and if you give it, that is also considered to be a violation, and that expenditure will not be allowed for income tax purpose. So minor things I will skip. 43B, not very interesting. Concessional rate of tax on dividend at 15% is not very, I mean, from foreign subsidiaries received was taxed at 15%. Now it is going to be stopped. TDS, there are certain very minor changes which I will talk about if time permits. It's not very important. Faceless assessments, very, very important. Faceless assessments are happening in a big way. Section 144B, subsection 9 was a very good section, Jamon, which was available to me, but now they said that that is going to be deleted. You know, by that, if the entire scheme of the assessment under the section 44B, faceless assessment, is not as per the scheme, section 9, subsection 9 said, if it is not done as per the scheme, it will be non-est, it will be void. Now they have removed that. I mean, that's a very, very unfortunate thing. I have a great grouse, and I want to ensure that we go against this, saying that is unconstitutional and things like that. I will talk about that a bit later on. So limitation for faceless assessment extended for, in fact,
can we take assessment
was supposed to come under faceless. They have extended it up to 2024. Now, one of the interesting concepts that they have come out is updated ITR. I mean, there is something called the revised income tax return, which you can file up to 9 months from the end of the assessment year. But then something, in case beyond that, there was no way we could have done it. Now they have introduced the concept of updated income tax return, which you can file up to 2 years from the end of the assessment year. But the interesting catch in red is that in case you go in for updation of your ITR, you will have to pay, in the first 12 months, if you update it, 25% of the tax plus interest has to be paid. Apart from the regular tax, you will have to pay 25% of tax plus interest. In case you pay beyond 12 months and up to 24 months, this will go up to 50%. And they have put in certain restriction when you cannot update your ITR. And lastly, some COVID reliefs have been given. Not very important. In case there is the hospital expenditure is borne by anybody for meeting a patient, that will be totally exempt from income tax. Similarly, if a person dies on account of COVID and the employer pays an ex gratia to the family members, in that context, it will be totally exempt from tax. If in case of a non-employee, let us say SNX, somebody comes and gives a person COVID, the family members, the ex gratia, that amount up to 10 lakhs will be exempt in the hands of the family members, provided it is received within 12 months from the date of the death of the person. So that gets me to the end of my presentation. I'm available for future discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. You covered everything in such a short span of time. And all of us agree that you needed more time. In the panel discussion, we always... Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, okay. A panel discussion, we always have the budget of time. I'll come back to you probably towards the end of the program for a roundup on some tax planning tips or whatever you think is relevant. Now we have the fourth panelist, our own managing committee member, and Gumar sir, who is serving as the MD of TCC, public sector expert and recipient of the prestigious Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Sector, a turnaround specialist, and who is very often consulted by the state government and the ministers for creating a better industrial environment, and also for reviving many of the PSUs in the state. Sir, MSMEs, their role has been belatedly recognized, contributing substantially to the GDP of the country, and we have a startup ecosystem which is just next to US and China, and it's still growing. 50,000 plus startups, and all of them have playing a very important role. So your take on what the budget is given, or rather what is expectation, what the budget is given for the MSMEs as well as the startups. Over to you.
Thank you, Jomon. I will start from where SR let off on the number of economists before and after the budget. See, in India, we are experts in everything. We play cricket better than Sachin Tendulkar. We can even give him tips on batting as to how to face a particular type of ball. We can teach Messi or Ronaldo on how to tackle football. All of us become psephologists for an election, and of course, economists during a budget. So consider my thoughts as that of an average Indian described above, and I will start with that caveat. See, well, I'm supposed to talk on the union budget, and that too with special reference to the impact on MSME and startups. In case I'm overshooting my time, please intervene and tell me when to stop. I will try to remain within the 10 minutes, whatever is allotted to me. See, though the budget is only an income and expenditure statement of the government, it is considered important as the speech reveals, as the speech of the finance minister generally reveals the plan of the government on how the government plans to move forward in the coming year, which are going to be the thrust areas, and what are the schemes. Because the government spend is high and the government still controls the business in one form or the other, budget continues to have a high importance in India, unlike many other Western countries. That is why there are a lot of pre-budget discussions, post-budget discussions, predictions as to what is going to happen, so on and so forth. See, before we get into that, let us see the premises of the economy on which the budget was drafted, where we stood on 21-22 when the budget was being deliberated. Of course, there are positive aspects and there are negative aspects. We all saw that the GDP grew at 9.2%, but the IMF prediction was 9.5, but the economic survey says it's 9.2. And even for the next year, as Vivek was saying, it is predicted at 8.5%. We all saw that there was a boom in tax revenue, GST and indirect taxes are virtually going to be almost around 15 to 20% above the budget estimate. There was an export boom, and the export went up from 300 billion, where it was stagnant, to almost 400 billion, a jump of 35%. But on the negative side, we also saw that privatization did not take off. Now the government is feeling that even BPCL may not have many takers because it is a fossil fuel and nobody wants to come forward and all that. So it may not get the desired valuation. And even the national monetization pipeline also did not pick up momentum what the government expected it to. And resulting in a fiscal deficit of almost 6.4, 6.5, 6.9, whatever percentage is there.
Sir, I think since Vivek is coming back again on the macro aspects, I would request you to be specific on MSME and.
Okay, I'll get into that.
Yes, sir. Yes.
See, unlike the previous budget, we saw announcement for coal-bounded states like Kerala. This year, we did not find many schemes, especially for any state, or even sectors like industry or agriculture or even MSME startups. But you can see the digital drive in the budget, which can be beneficial to MSME and startups. And it is also important that the finance minister, as it was discussed, that did not pursue the populist approach. So the easy and politically alternative way would have been to support consumption, but the finance minister decided that it is better to drive investment, and that too public investment. And from all these, the MSME and the startups are going to benefit. See, the capital expenditure, as we also, is going to go up from 35 to 5.54 by 35%, from 5.54 to 7.5 crores. And FM also raised the allocation for industry loan to states for capex spending. And all this money can actually result in a spurge in spending of a growth of MSME, because there are a lot of government schemes to procure more from MSMEs, and there are government directions on increased procurement from MSMEs. So definitely it will give a thrust to more opportunities for MSME and startups.
And sir, the emergency.
I will come to that. Please let me speak. I'll come to that. Yeah. And when we talk about this MSME and startups, you can find it signals a digital drive to many initiatives, driving from recognizing the virtual assets, issuing digital currency, digital university, digital banking, payment platforms, auctioning 5G spectrum, building of optical fiber network, e-passports, digitalizing land records, etc., etc. The budget also marked a bold move to move into the sunrise sectors like green technology, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, drones, Kisan drones, even mobility devices, fintech, all these things are going to appeal to the young and aspiring entrepreneurs. Now, coming to the specifics stated in the budget with respect to MSMEs, see, we all saw that the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee ECLGS scheme has been extended up to 31/3/23, which is a good step, which is actually demanded by the industry per se. And 50,000 crores of this, 50,000 crores also is earmarked especially to the hospitality sector, because the sector was reeling under the various impacts of COVID. And now there is another scheme called the CGTMSE scheme, the Credit Guarantee Fund Trust for Micro and Small Enterprises. They talk about revamping with infusion of funds. This actually is a setup, this is set up jointly by the Department of MSME and SIDBI to catalyze the flow of institutional credit to micro and small enterprises. You know, micro and small enterprises account almost for 90% of the MSME sector. And this will facilitate additional credit of almost 2 lakh crores. And there is another allocation of almost 6,000 crores under RAMP that is raising and accelerating MSME performance, which will be rolled out in 5 years to make MSME resilient, because the FM speech was talking basically about how to make MSME resilient, how to make it competitive, and how to improve productivity. Yeah. This RAMP is basically meant to make the MSME resilient, competitive, and productive. And this actually is a World Bank intervention meant to give better access to finance and working capital, and for scaling up online dispute resolution mechanism. And even for the brick and mortar industry in the MSME sector, extension of PLI scheme can be a benefit to them. Even 68% of defense procurement coming under the Atmanirbhar Bharat, wherein there is a talk about MSME also getting a share, also is going to be beneficial to the MSME in the defense sector. So these things are going to be beneficial. And the government also talked about ease of doing business 2.0, reducing the compliance requirement, more digitization, standardization. These are also going to be boon for the small enterprises. Another thing is EC exit scheme for the voluntary closure of companies. That again is a welcome step, because among startup, the failure rate, or even MSME, the failure rate is slightly high. So that again is a good thing, which will enthuse all the startup aspirants to venture, because it is easier to close down. Even MCA, I understand, is working on a single portal. And coming to startups per se, the regulatory mechanism, FM talked about a regulatory mechanism for venture capitalists, which is a good initiative, because many of the people at the initial stage may not be knowing about how to deal with the VCs and all that. And even tax concession, the tax incentive up to 31/3/23 for period of incorporation is also a welcome move for the startups. And for the manufacturing companies in the startup sector, domestic manufacturing commencement up to production 31/3/24. And another thing which is the government announced is a fund with a blended capital under the co-investment model facilitated through NABARD to finance startups in agriculture and rural enterprise across the farmer food chain. And artificial intelligence, drone, genomics for startups, Kisan drones, these are all good initiatives, and which will appeal to the startup people in the startup sector. Another thing which is going to appeal to many is the promotion task for AVGC sector, that is the animation, visual effect, gaming, and the comic sector. So overall, it is going to appeal to the youngsters, because the government also wants to give more thrust to the growth to the sunrise sector rather than the brick and mortar sector. So the opportunities are plenty. The government may not be mentioning per se that it is for SME, it is for the startup, but the opportunities are there. And it is going to be a public investment-led growth. There is going to be an infrastructure push. there is already an incentive by union government for the states also to invest in infrastructure, and the MSME sector can actually go across the spectrum and reap the benefits. And with the trust of the youth, focusing on the sunrise sector, the government at last is playing the role of a facilitator. And that was the motto of the government: minimum government and maximum governance. So look across and reap the maximum benefit. I think MSME and startup ecosystem has a lot to gain from this budget. Thank you, and over to you, Joma.
Very, very well said, sir. Very exhaustive. And as you rightly said, the capex push and all that would have downstream effect on the MSMEs positively. And we need to round up quickly. So Vivek, back to you on the rest of the macro aspects briefly. I mean, of course, all of us are concerned a little bit, but then please do that as in the most effective fashion, as that you would, of course, with some slides as you wanted to do. We have another 5 minutes.
Okay. Given that we have another 5 minutes, I'm not really going to get into the slides. So what I'll quickly do is just quickly run through some of the important sectors, because I think we're on the wrong end of time. Let's also listen to some of our senior faculty speakers who have been invited from far and away also. Now, banking and financial services, the ECLGS scheme has been spoken about. Also, the allocation of 48,000 crore for the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is certainly going to be a big help, which will push that forward. On the real estate side, again, the 35% increase in capex. This is really a capex budget finally, 7.5 lakh crore. It's going to completely change the way the entire infrastructure is built, 25,000 kilometers of road. And so that's going to really, lead to consumption and investment and jobs and all of that. So it's going to, everything is going to be, related to the whole infrastructure side of it. And again, roads, highways, the budget allocation for that has been, another 50% increase. Almost 2 trillion rupees is the budgetary allocation for that. On the IT side, also, it will be very interesting to see how the 5G spectrum auctions and the whole rollout happens related to 5G. That is the future of IT, and also the promotion of EV vehicles, also IT, auto, etc. The again moving back to the new gen green economy that we spoke about. Healthcare, couple of interesting announcements. We'll have to figure out how this pans out. The open platform for national digital health ecosystem and the national telemental health program will be a couple of interesting things. Also, some thrust given to R&D in genomics there. On the power side, the country is likely to focus more on the whole renewable energy, again, the green that we spoke about. Additional allocation of almost 20,000 crore for PLI for high energy solar modules. Again, solar is going to be the way forward there. And on the agricultural side, again, technology is going to be a big driver. We spoke about that earlier, the Kisan drone, delivery of digital and high-end. On the PPP model also, a lot of discussion has happened. So it will be interesting to see how agriculture is going to be looked at from a PPP perspective, and the 2.37 lakh crore direct payment transfer of MSP also. Once it reaches the hands of the farmers, will certainly, that's going to uplift the way they function. And interestingly, another thing which we saw is that though the common man, if you look at it, middle class, have not been given much of SOPs, a lot of compliance-friendly measures. Vijay spoke about some of these. So I'm not getting to the tax side, but on the other side, on the non-tax regulations also, Madam spoke about 1,486 laws being repealed, almost 25,000 compliances being reduced over the past few years, and the SEZ Act is going to be replaced. That's something very interesting. We're all looking forward to seeing to what extent that is going to impact the way the whole export zones are going to operate moving forward, and that's a much needed change also. So all in all, I don't think we'll have time for me to have a closing comment on this. So let me close with my comments that this seems to be a very realistic budget and believable numbers, more transparency in the way in which the budget document has been. In fact, some of the numbers, revenue, etc., we even feel it is understated to some extent. We believe that the revenue numbers could only go up from what has been budgeted and estimated. 7.5 lakh crore of capex expenditure budgeted. One is not very sure whether so much can be spent in 1 year. So we'll have to see how much of it can actually, so we're talking about 1 year. So you need, projects on which it needs to be spent. So how much of that is actually going to translate into ground level spend is also something which should be interesting. And overall, I think we should all be optimistic and look forward to much better times ahead. And some of the areas which have not been taken up here probably may come as part of mini budgets. We've seen that that's been a speciality of the current government. So we may find a mini budget coming wherein some of the other aspects could also be looked into. So with this, let me close and hand back to our moderator. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vivek. Implementation challenges and worries are always there. In fact, today, Mr. C. Rangarajan, former RBI governor, is mentioning about the same thing, whether this much could be done in a short span of time, particularly on the capex. So let's look forward with a lot of optimism here. And now it is back to you, Dr. Vijay Kumar, for a roundup. To Acharya sir, I don't think I'll be able to give because you run through the slides and we would request you to share the slides with us. And this would come as in the KMA newsletter. This would come as a complete budget presentation. All your inputs will be given to the members in soft copy as well as hard copy. So let me see. I will check with the president as well. So now it is to Dr. VKV for the specifics on the Indian capital market and around it.
Jomon, I will take up from where Vivek has left off. He gave us the thrust of the budget. He told us that the thrust of the budget is on capex. It is a capex-led growth-oriented budget with a substantial increase in the allocation of capital allocation. Of course, it is a big question whether all this money can be spent. Actually, even last year, the money could not be spent. A very important indicator is the total cash balance of the government with the RBI. The total cash balances of the government with the RBI is 2% of the GDP. So that is an indicator of how difficult it is to spend the money. I agree with Vivek that particularly the revenue receipts for the next year and also the nominal GDP projections for next year are understated. Maybe taking a deviation from the past, the finance minister is trying to under promise and over deliver, like Infosys used to do in the past in their results, under promise and over deliver. I've been actually wondering why the 2022-23 nominal GDP growth is projected at only 11.1%, right? The government has stated that the GDP is expected to grow by 8 to 8.5%. Even if we take the lower end of the band, let us say 8%, assuming 5% inflation, it should be 13% nominal GDP growth. But then it is not the CPI inflation that is taken into consideration for deflation. We have another denominator for GDP deflated. But even then, 8% GDP growth in real terms can easily translate into 12.5% nominal GDP growth.
Incidentally, we have a question in the chat box. Is 8% GDP for 23 realistic, given the current rural slowdown?
Yeah. It is realistic. It is certainly realistic. It can be achieved because this is the kind of capex which the government is doing. 7.5 lakh crores is a money earmarked for capex. And actually, the effective capex will be more than that. It will be 10.5 lakh crores. And the economic theory behind this is, with this kind of massive expenditure on capex, instead of the fiscal deficit crowding out private investment, this kind of capex will crowd in private investment and set off a virtuous cycle in the economy. So 8% is certainly achievable. But then this 11.1% nominal GDP growth is very much on the lower side. And also the revenue expectation is 9.6%, tax revenue growth, 9.6%. I would have loved, I would have preferred the finance minister to put the nominal GDP growth at 12% plus, and the revenue growth at more than 10.5%, which are feasible, and bring down the fiscal deficit to, let us say, 6.1%, which would have inspired a lot of confidence in investors, because 6.4% fiscal deficit is on the higher side, even though we have succeeded in bringing it down from 9.3 to 6.9, and from 6.9 the target is 6.4. 6.4 is high. It is important for us to understand that our our debt to GDP ratio is the highest among emerging markets. It is 90%. I'm not talking about the center plus states. It is 90%. So when you have a 90% of your debt, 90% of your GDP as debt, well, the economy becomes vulnerable to financial instability. Some black swan event. Now, black swan events are not very black these days. It is coming very frequently. So when you have some black swan event, it is probable that the financial instability can be impacted. Remember the 1991 balance of payments crisis. It was nowhere in the picture about 1.5, 2 years ago, before that. But then the Saddam Hussein's aggression of Kuwait, crude oil prices shooting up to the roof, and suddenly all hell broke loose. We had the balance of payments crisis and major macroeconomic instability. I'm not saying that we are in a situation like that. We are very strong. Forex reserves at $635 billion are strong. Economy is hugging along. All the positives are there, but then 90% of GDP as debt and 6.4% fiscal deficit are not very comforting. The finance minister should have made it at least look easier. And then one takeaway from Vivek's projection of the capex is, from the market perspective, some sectors are certainly going to do well. The market immediately responds. Yesterday, you look at that, the market's performance in the 800 points plus Sensex rally. The stocks that performed well were the capital goods, because when you have this kind of capital expenditure, companies like L&T, Siemens, ABB will do well, and immediately the markets responded. And when you have a virtuous cycle in the economy emerging from this capex and expected capex from the private sector also, well, the financials will be doing well. Big financials have not been doing well during the last 2 years because of the asset quality concerns and poor credit growth. But now, if you look at the results of HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank, and SBI Bank, credit growth is picking up very smartly. Asset quality concerns are coming down. So it is quite possible that the financials will do exceedingly well for the coming year. So infrastructure, high capital goods, then infrastructure, industries like cement, again, stocks like cement stocks like ACC and the leading cement companies, they also appreciated very much. You asked me to give you some tips on investment.
Yeah, I'm listening. All of us are listening.
No, I'm not allowed to do that under the SEBI rules.
Oh, really?
Under the SEBI rules, I'm not supposed to talk about stocks. I can only give some broad indications about.
But you can always put an asterisk and say subject to market risks.
No, the stock specific I can't. Because if I start
sector, fair enough, sir.
I've not taken permission for that, because if I
understand,
if I take permission for that, I will have to sell all my stocks, and I have to invest only through the mutual funds. So I'm in love with my stocks, therefore I will not do that. Okay. And also, you asked me to give me predictions of where the Sensex and Nifty will be. Here again, I will disappoint you, because the very simple, frank answer is I don't know. Also, I know that nobody knows, because compared to stock market prediction, I have always felt that astrology is a more exact science. Therefore,
I read somewhere that the capital markets are in the bubble range. I don't know.
Yes, many people are, many experts, even some renowned people say that there are bubbles. But then, if you go by valuations in the US valuations are not very high, right? Even though the tech valuations are high. In India, if you go by historical valuations of the PE multiple, it is now more than 21 times forward earnings. The long-term historical average has been 15 to 16. Again, if you go by price to book, dividend yield, all this indicate high valuations. But then India has always been attracting a premium valuations in emerging markets. Now our emerging market, India's valuations to emerging markets is around 80 to 90% on the higher side. But then a big difference has been made by retail participation. Last year in 2021, FII sold 54,560 crores. For the last 4 months, there have been big sellers. Total for the year is 54,564 crores equity sales to the stock market alone, the stock exchange. But the markets went up. The broader market went up by around 40%, 24% increase in Nifty, 46% in Nifty mid cap, 59% in Nifty small caps. So broader market, we can say 40%. So in spite of this huge selling by FIIs of 54,600 crores, the market rallied because domestic institutions who are flush with funds invested.
I'm sure you could go on. I'm all this, but
Yes,
then
yes.
we have the budget of time. So if you could conclude in another 2 minutes, I just go to swap over to Acharya sir, since he has been there all throughout, for another 2-3 minutes for a roundup, and then probably wind up the session. And we are almost at 7:45. I apologize for the paucity of time. Yeah, another 2-3 minutes for you, Doctor.
I can understand. So in brief, I would say this year we had fantastic returns on the market in 2021 and 2020 also, in spite of being a pandemic year. So since the valuations are high, expect only modest returns. I will not quantify what modest returns are, but expect low double-digit returns. If it is low double-digit returns, and not low double-digit, let us say 12%, 13% would be good. But you should be prepared even for returns lower than that. But then markets have an uncanny ability to surprise. Therefore, even if the returns are in, let us say, about 15%, I won't be surprised. And this can happen if the economy registers a smart recovery based on the capex that we are having. Not only the capex by the government, the capex by the private sector also. Even though for the general economy, capex is not happening from the private sector side, in some segments like renewable energy, for instance, and 5.4 lakh crores were invested in the startup ecosystem by the venture capital funds and the PE funds last year. And all this money which goes into the startups is getting spent in the economy. So there is private capex happening also, even though the capacity utilization in the organized sector is low. So expect a modest returns from the capital market for the coming year. But then in stock market, we always say, look for the long term. So invest not for 2022 or 2023, invest for 2027, by which time Indian economy, GDP will be a 5 trillion economy. 2 years we have lost. So, and by 2030, we can be a 7 trillion economy with a market cap also of more than 7 trillion, which can bring handsome profits to all investors. Thank you.
Really nice to end up on a very optimistic note. And Acharya 2 minutes for you to round up. Then I'll. Anything further you want to add? You have to unmute.
No, I just saw one of the chat box, Mr. Ramesh asking a question. There's something about TDS deduction at higher rate for no return filers. In fact, this was there last year itself. What they have done in this current budget is they have reduced the strain. Instead of searching out for 2 years non-filing, I have to see only if the immediate last year, if the income tax return has not been filed, I have to charge levy a higher TDS or TCS rate at 5%. Or twice the rate, whichever is higher. So that is what it is. Now, as a closing remark, I should say, Jawan, you did a very good job. There was no deficit on the time perspective. Although you were told that 6 to 8 is what you said, I think you came out with the surplus budget as far as the session is concerned. But I always used to say one thing, how the economists fool the people in that sense. The entire outlay of the budget is 39.5 lakh crore. And they say that the deficit is only 6.4%. Now, I mean, I always think that it is 6.4% of 39.5 lakh crore. It is not like that. It is 6.4% of GDP.
GDP, yeah.
The budget outlay is something, and then they say the deficit is 6.4% of the turnover. I mean, the GDP is the turnover of the country. I mean, as a chartered accountant, if I may say. In fact, if you work out, the deficit is 42% of the total budget outlay. So that is where is the challenge, and that's what Mr. Vijay Kumar was talking about. The borrowings to GDP is about 90%. In fact, if India prepares a balance sheet, the capital will be on the asset side. I mean, that's how it is. So I think as a closing remark,
15 lakhs more to be 15 lakh crores more to be borrowed immediately.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I say, as citizens of India, we should not expect anything more from the country. That's why I said in my thank you slide, the famous quote of John F. Kennedy, ask not what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for the country. With that remark, thank you so much for inviting.
Thank you so much. So that is a wonderful discussion. Hope all of you are feeling enriched and most of you stayed through. We had at a peak time more than 160, more than 100 are still with us. So President, it's back to you for your remarks. And then before I propose a formal vote of thanks, Program Committee Chair had to leave. So back to you, President.
Thank you so much, Jomon, and all the esteemed panelists. Of course, you can go on and on with this discussion for much more time, but then all of you did justice to what you said, and of course, sticking to the time was difficult, but still you did that. And I'm sure the crowd, which was touching almost 179 at one point of time, still more than half staying back after nearly 75 minutes. It's really not 75 minutes actually. It's more than the 1.5 hours actually. Yeah. So it really shows the kind of interest which everyone has, because it's a suspense thriller kind of a thing. You saw the poster and then read something and getting more details only while watching the movie. So this is what is happening. From now on, many more such analysis will come. I'm sure this will give a real sneak preview of what it was all in whole for all of us. Thank you so much to all the speakers for their time and valuable inputs which you gave us. Before I hand it back to Jomon for the formal vote of thanks, let me just inform some of the events which are coming up. We have the next KMA Leader Talks event scheduled on February 16th. And we have Mr. Vijay Kumar, Senior Partner at Kristen Menon from UAE. And he is going to talk on the topic, Entrepreneurial Nation, Skill Up, Startup and Scale Up Businesses in the UAE. That is by Mr. Vijay Kumar on February 16th. And on 21st February, we have a book launch session by none other than Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, the former top executive at Hindustan Unilever and Tata's, and his blood brother, Mr. R. Srinivasan, of the latest book, Pivots for Career Success. That's the latest book written by both of them together, the brothers. Both the authors will be presenting the book to us, and they will be engaged in a conversation by our program committee chair and past president, Mr. S.R. Nair. This is going to be on 21st February at 6 p.m. We also have an MSME workshop focusing on the need to embrace technological advancements, which is going to be coming up this month. And also the next edition of the Rendezvous with the CEO series will be coming up before month end. So please stay tuned to our announcements and notices on WhatsApp, SMS, email for more details on this and more. But now it's time for the formal vote of thanks by our Honorary Secretary, come moderator, CA Jomon George.
Thank you, President. It's a narration of what has been done in the year, which is very difficult, and what is being done, and on top of all that, a very challenging task on the on the new KMA infrastructure, the state-of-the-art building we are working on itself is proof that how dynamic our president is. So let me start by thanking the president for all that you have done and that you're going to do, and also for encouraging to have a session like this. Though the idea was mooted by myself and Vivek, because budgets are closer to chartered accountants, and so therefore thank you so much for that. Anyway, it turned out to be a feast of knowledge, a rich spread of knowledge for the participants, no doubt about it. So thank you, President, once again. And to the participants, going in the right order, a big thank you for turning out in large numbers. Apology for not addressing all the questions, but I think sector-specific questions, most of them were answered by Vivek, and there's a macro swap between Dr. Vijay Kumar and Vivek, and altogether we stand enriched at this point of time. So Vivek, I don't know whether I can thank you as a former president and today as a panelist. You have done exceptionally well. Sorry that the slides could not be presented, but sure, I'm requesting, commonly requesting with the permission of the president, to share your presentations. This was recorded. I also to Acharya sir, so that we can bring out a comprehensive article on the budget, or probably as a budget document of KMA that we can think about. So thank you so much, Vivek. And to Dr. VKB, I mean, to the students there, you should know that his sessions are not lectures. They're lessons for all of you, this global exposure. And how it's a cascade, when he starts talking, and it's a cascade of information on capital market and economy in which, at your usual unique best, thank you so much for making the evening very special. And to Guru Raja Acharya, and being with us all the time, and for giving a very lucid presentation of the complex tax provisions. I could see that you have customized for a management associations format, or it is a special thing than you normally present for chartered accounts, where we talk about subsections, provisos, and all that. So it came out to be really well. Look forward to receiving the slides from you. And to Hari Kumar sir, I mean, again, I had to interrupt in between. I was not trying to put words into your mouth. It was just a great session on MSMEs, as well as giving a macro introduction, and which is very close to your heart, MSMEs, the downstream, and also for the startups. They're very in detail, exceptionally well. mentioned about the schemes which are rolling out, and with the optimism that what is happening on a macro scale will have a downstream effect on the MSMEs and the startups as well. So that the ecosystem thrive and so that we all stand to benefit and the nation gallops forward as a very strong economy, as the fastest growing large economy, as Dr. Vijay Kumar said. So a collective thank you once again to Hari Kumar sir, a collective thank you to all the four panelists and to the team at the Secretariat, Jojo, Prajit, Sangeeta, all of them, Sandra, all of them, a big thank you. Patmomar, all of you, big thank you. Seamlessly we could do this. And not to leave out our sponsors who are supporting all our events, Sierra, Medivision, Heal, and Verma Homes for their continued support. So altogether, I think we are concluding on a very optimistic note that the canvas has been made, long-term budget has been prepared, and that has been presented. So before I conclude, on screen as the mementos, which are now virtually displayed, all of you, and as we say that proof that you have been at KMA this evening, this will be posted, mailed across to you in a physical form. A big thank you also. Thank you, Prajit, for reminding me about that. And therefore, once again, thank you all. Have a great evening. Good night. Signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Secretary Jamon George, and all the panelists and all the delegates who are present here, sitting through the lengthy session. Thank you all.